Cancer has made a absolutely massive impact on me, that being my son's diagnosis. And so the caregiver aspect, the being a parent of somebody going through something so, extreme, connected with Audra and the Max Love Project as parents understanding kind of the very, very similar paralleling stories. It's a conversation that I hope that you can take away how important taking care of ourselves as a caregiver really is if we're going to be the best for our kiddos. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm excited to talk about something that's pretty important. And unfortunately, on one hand, I feel like it's something that too many people know, but maybe not everybody fully appreciates what it means. So if you will, give us that brief introduction to who you are and share the Max Love Project.
Sure thing. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm Audra. I'm the founder of Max Love Project, and I started the organization in late 2011 after my then 4-year-old son was diagnosed with brain cancer. Immediately, we were in Orange County, California at the time, and we saw just tremendous inequities. There was just not a lot of opportunities for other kids to have access to what we had access to at the time. So we were told to focus on my son's quality of life. He has a brainstem glioma, which is incurable, and we were told that his prognosis wasn't good. And so when I heard the words quality of life, I thought, okay, they're giving me something I can do. What does that mean to focus on the quality of the time we have with him? And my husband heard, oh, they're giving us palliative care. There's not a lot of hope. You know, it just goes to show with like parents, you have different interpretations. But for me, it was a rallying cry. It was like, okay. And I was trained as a chef. I was a line cook. I have a lot of experience in the kitchen. And I thought, what can I cook for him? What kind of complementary therapies do we need to do? Like what are the things, right, that are going to help him thrive? And so we set off doing these things. He was in the hospital he was taken to the hospital in an ambulance and was there for a month. We get home, he couldn't walk. He had to learn how to walk again and had to go straight into chemotherapy and then eventually radiation. And we just started uncovering the things that we thought could help him, like sleep, physical activity. What are the sorts of healing foods that we could deploy? And so we had a steep learning curve ourselves, but my husband was at UCLA at the time, and so he was in the med libraries, like just digging through research, trying to find what we could find to help Max. And I remember being at the infusion center, and Max was eating like cucumbers and peppers and I don't know, some sort of like snack mix I made for him. And they were like, you know, if he loses any weight, you're going to have to stop feeding him that way. You're just going to have to feed him normal, quote unquote, normal food. And I was like, what do you mean by normal food? Right. And at the same time, after, you know, when we had that first meeting with everybody, looking at the treatment plan, roadmap and all that, I had asked for a dietitian to be on the team. And they said, why does he need that? He doesn't have any clinical reason to have a dietitian. And I said, I don't want him to have a clinical reason to need a dietitian, right? And so I said, well, what's your smoothie menu? You know, he's having a hard time eating solid foods. Like, what can we do with a smoothie? So they slide it across the table and I look at it. What does it have on it? Imagine. Nesquik, Carnation Instant Breakfast, ice cream, and Ensure, and like a combination of all of those, right? Like that was all that was on there. And I was like, you know, I don't know much, but all of this is 100% refined sugar. Like this cannot be, and chemicals, like this cannot be okay for this child who has severe traumatic brain injury and cancer and so on and so forth, right? Yeah. So Max was doing well. People are surprised. Why is he doing okay? So we start the organization at the end of that year just to start building community and giving resources to other families. My workplace, I was at a college at the time, gave me a year of time to be with Max. So I had a year of time off. and off, if you will, taking him to, 14 appointments a week. It was definitely a full-time job in and of itself, but I knew that we had to pay it forward, and that the tragedy of this cancer diagnosis shouldn't just remain that, like, a personal journey in that way. Like, we had to turn it upside down and turn it into hope for ourselves. So why not also turn it into hope for other people? My husband and I are both educators. We're like, we're going to share this. We're going to figure out a way to make our learning exponential in helping others, maybe just get a few steps further ahead than we were when we started. So that was back in 2011. And we started the organization, super grassroots, at the kitchen table, a couple of friends to serve on the board, figuring out what we could do. The first thing that we started to do is offer cooking classes in the community. So I was teaching other families how to cook, utilizing whole foods. We then found the ketogenic diet. Max had a major recurrence, and we'd been doing a lot of research. This is how we met Dr. Nasha. This is how we met Dr. Dominic D'Agostino and the entire Metabolic. I'm so sorry. I'm like totally spacing it because I'm thinking about a Metabolic Train Institute of Health, which is Nasha's group. But we met the entire Metabolic Health Summit, now known as the Metabolic Health Summit group. At the time, they were with Quest Nutrition, working in the Epigenics Foundation, which was an amazing initiative. But we dove deep into metabolic health, put together a scientific advisory board, and started really putting together educational programming, and also deeper diagnostics and coaching to support families using metabolic therapies. We were invited back to the hospital that we started at a few years after that to engage in a culinary medicine program together collaboratively. They changed the shake menu. We had worked with hundreds of families by then. People had seen incredible changes to quality of life, and we think also disease state. And they changed the smoothie menu, so it's now all whole foods based. It's absolutely incredible. You see avocado in there instead of Ensure, things like that. We had a bone broth program at that hospital as well, and then we started pioneering teaching culinary medicine classes in the hospital. So fast forward to today, we offer both community-based and hospital-based culinary medicine programming. We have built a collaborative where we're starting to extend that programming to more hospitals. We've been testing our curriculum for about 11 years now, and so we're ready to release it. We have a cookbook. We have an online app and platform bringing families together across the country and around the world. We have a ton of content in there around integrative health, what we call Fierce Foods Culinary Medicine. We have a course that will be out in a few weeks with Dr. Bonnie Goldstein on cannabis as medicine. So it's all expert-led programming. We collaborate with Nasha and her team, really trying to bring this information into the pediatric space from the adult world, translate it, bring it into a space to make it more actionable for parents. And then we do emotional health programming. So we really do a good amount of work using internal family systems therapy coaching for parents. We do things like breath work. Online, we also have retreats where we do various things from sound healing to breath work and meditation, culinary medicine, using all of these modalities to help not just the kids thrive, but really to support the entire family in the process. You know what it's like. I cannot wait to hear your full story as well, but I think we have a lot in common from what I understand. And if the parents aren't held in the process, the child won't do as well. It's just there's so many programs that only want to focus on the kid, but we've seen that as being very incomplete. It's an entire family unit that is so deeply affected. So we focus on that family-based care. So we've been doing this for almost 13 years. And we have home base in Orange County, California. We have our new satellite location as of 2 years ago here in Savannah, Georgia. And then we serve families in our app. So that is the gist of it.
I love it, Audra. I love it. I hate that, it has to be something that's so, detrimental to just kind of a family and the adversity there. But as you were going through through that at the end, what you said about, the family and the emotional state and the parents, I think back to something that, Tom Cowan told me. Dr. Cowan he knew how a child was going to do based on the parents. I thought, wow.
100%. Yep.
So I think that caregiver focus is so crucial. I think it's such an important topic to pay attention to, based on, just like my observations with it too. So 2019 was when we got that, gut punch, and I was told that my 5-year-old was stage 4 Wilm, so kidney cancer. Yeah. And I remember having a very similar conversation on nutrition. Like, hey, what do we do? What do I do? Like, I like how you put the difference between what your husband heard and what you heard. Yeah. I'm like, hey, how do we do this? But I feel that you and I are very similar on how we attacked it. It was like, it's what do we do? And so going back also to that mindset thing, I never let Lander think he was sick though either. So like I would go to the bathroom at Children's, we were on the oncology floor, and I would have a breakdown, right? I'd go turn on the shower, break down, try to regain my composure, then come back out there to him for, hey, this is what we're doing, right?
Same here. I totally identify. Yeah.
I think that's why, I don't know what it is for sure, but it's that being able to share and be a service of other people almost make not necessarily what you go through worth it, but it gives it meaning, so to speak. So how do you feel we cultivate that mindset for the adversity? One thing that I had going into it was the Napoleon Hill quote, and it was just ingrained in me as I was trying to, really be financially successful, right? But with every adversity comes a seed of an equal or greater opportunity. And so that just kept playing in my mind. Yeah. And so how do we do that? How do we cultivate that mindset that, hey, what it is what it is? What can we focus on, control, and create something positive out of it?
I love that. And thank you for sharing that, kind of what informed your journey walking into it. It was similar for me walking into our journey. I was a leadership educator at the time in Southern California, working in higher education, so with college students. And I was working on a program that the foundation of the program was resilience, and really using Brene Brown, using Viktor Frankl. So for me, one of the foundational things for me was, my son is a victim of this cancer in the moment of diagnosis. Our whole family is, right? But there is that space between stimulus and response, where we get the freedom to choose our response, right? And Viktor Frankl said this was the last enduring human freedom. And his story was, he was a professor who was subjected to insane torture and testing in Auschwitz. And instead of thinking of vengeance, he thought, what am I going to teach my students about this? What is that going to look like when I'm out, right? How am I going to make this into something? So I think you and I both came at this from a very similar perspective, right? It's not to diminish the pain, right, and the devastation of something like a childhood cancer diagnosis, but it's to then look at it and say, we have the opportunity to choose our response. Absolutely. What does that look like for us, right? And how can we help others do the same thing? And I think you're absolutely right. It is a mindset shift. And I think one of the biggest challenges that we've seen is that our responses are very often predicated on our layers of traumas, right? So very often families might come in, I've seen this over the 13 years, re-traumatized. Often parts in them are triggered from earlier or way earlier, even childhood events that make it really difficult to tease out. I'm in a trauma right now, a profound trauma right now, that is tied to, my response is tied to prior traumas, right? And so in that way, our emotional health is so important because, like you said, and so clearly true, the research shows us too, our children are buffered from the trauma through us. We shoulder that. The research shows we can buffer them. They're resilient to the trauma if they have a stable and safe person, at least one person to rely on. Yeah. And so it's such an important role that we play. And what we show up for is so big, so huge. So what I worked with my students on is you're all going to face something in your life, at least one thing, if not many, many, many more. How do you prepare yourself to show up for life? So when this shoe drops for you, like it did for me, what does it look like for you to then respond and potentially make it into something? You may not make it into something for the entire world, but maybe you make it into something for your family, right? Yeah. Maybe you're able to then, so to me, it is like working out, right? It is like there's definitely something in that resilience training and that preparation, which does include some trauma work so that you can start to tease through, am I triggered today in the hospital because my kid is getting their port accessed and that's traumatic enough? Or is it I'm having a bigger response because I had something that I couldn't control in my body at some point in my life earlier, right? And as we start to do that inner work and see and engage in our own healing, we can just show up better for our kid and our family. So that's where our emotional health work comes from. Like we started with this nutrition programming, which is essential. We're doing like precision genomics now, like really cool stuff. But a family might come in and say, I want nutrition. I want to change the whole diet. I'm changing the whole family. And what's really just right underneath there is like the emotional health stuff is actually first. Like the nutrition might be the doorway, but what the family finds is I need help with processing what's been happening to us. And once we start to really safely and in a supportive way get to the stuff inside, right? Thriving is an inside job. We start to uncover our potential to really, really show up for our family and for others. So I think it's super cool that your prior experience kind of led you to respond in the way that you have as well. It's a really powerful thing to think about, right? That mindset side of it, I think, is almost square one.
Yeah. No, I think I agree wholeheartedly with absolutely everything you just said there. And, thinking back, I love how you brought up Viktor Frankl, because The Man's Search for Meaning was one of the books I had read maybe 18 months prior to the diagnosis. So that's spot on. And when you hear his story, I don't know how you can not be moved and have almost like a reset for how you view everything in life, like the 100%. Victim versus victor almost contrast there. But another event that happened for me, and this is where, like, for me, I have zero questions that God exists in certain moments, right? Like, So I remember standing there, I was on the phone actually ordering pizza in the ER room when we did not know what was going on other than Lander was peeing blood. And I remember looking out, and you have those little rectangular windows in the room doors, and I saw a group of people standing there in white coats. And you just knew something was off. They hadn't any idea what it was. And so I remember hanging up the phone, and then they walked in. Everybody solemn faced, and the lead doc came up to me. He said, I guess I'm telling you, it's not good. I'm like, okay, well, we'll just rip that Band-Aid right off. And he said, have you felt your son's stomach? I'm like, well, no. He said, come here. And so he grabbed my hands and he pushed down, and he said, what do you feel? And I said, it's hard. He's like, yeah, we have found a mass in there. And he said, don't really know. And so then he handed me off to the oncologist to say, hey, we don't know. Like, we don't know what's going on, but we're going to figure it out. It's leaning towards probably Wilms, probably a kidney cancer. And so they regrouped. They said, we're going to get more scans, and we're going to take you up to 4K, which was the oncology floor. And so, and then they left, and the nurse that had been there with us, Randy Rice, he said, come here. He said, let's go. And so he just took me. I'm just completely deer in the headlights, shocked. And he takes me down the hall, out another hall into another room. And he said, let it out. He said, this is the time right now. Just break down. This is 5 years ago. I still get all emotional, but he said, let it out, because when you get back to that room, you have got to be the rock for your family. And so, Still, man, like he reset me in that moment, you know, like just completely gut punch to reset. So how do we navigate these situations even when we don't have, say, a Randy?
Yeah, I think it's a really, really great point. And that is, it's so important because you've got, I think many of us have a Randy, right? You've got these folks. I think part of the message for me with all of the hospitals we work with, all the clinicians we've worked with is, I know you want to sugarcoat it because it hurts you to tell us, and it hurts you to tell us the truth. And y'all don't have training in how to tell us the truth. You don't have training in authentic relating or like how, like you have training in science and medicine, right? You know, maybe not bedside, you know, stuff. And so I know it's easier for you sometimes to like tiptoe around, but it can be really more helpful than anything to hear it straight. And then to have that kind of support for showing up. I had a similar experience. Our son's neurosurgeon, the first person we met in the ER, in the ICU when we got there in the ambulance. And he was like, you need to get it together. And you need to get a notepad and you need to take notes on everything everyone says to you in here. You are your kid's number one advocate. You're the only one who's showing up full time for your kid, right? You need to be the one to do this.
Yeah.
And it's similar kind of like wake up call of like, okay, we don't know anything about the system. You don't know anything about the system. You drive by that children's hospital day in and day out and do not know what's happening in there until you have to be in there. And there's no guidebook. Nobody's giving you any training, right? And then all of a sudden you're there with the most complicated information you'll ever be presented with and your kid in a life-threatening situation. It's traumatic, right? And then you have to make decisions and process and deal with things, right? So having the support of the system is key because they're the first point of intervention. In absence of that, I think that you are totally right. If anyone's listening to this and they know someone who's going through this, or you never know, you might go through something like this. It could be any of these things. To know that it's essential for you to emotionally process. It's essential for you to find that chapel, that cry room, that quiet room, whatever it is. And it's essential for you to let that out. You have to. You can't stuff it in. The body will keep the score. It will show up in ways that are not pretty, right? You have to do that. You have to emote. But at the same time, we do have to be aware and cognizant of how we are showing up for our child and the fact that they're reading us. They intuit from us, right?
Oh, yeah. Every
sense of safety or danger comes from us. So I did the same thing walking into my son's PICU room, and she's like, hey, bud, right? We made up a story. We made up a story about how he's got his brain is amazing and it's such a cool place to be. He's got these cells that mutated like transformers, and they kind of turned into bad guys in the sense that they're building a house in the middle of his brain. And we have a ninja surgeon that's going to come take it out, which he couldn't take it all out. It wasn't possible in the brainstem, but still, so that then the story transformed into what chemotherapy is in the same way, and the superpowers of green things and green food and green medicine and all this. And that we had him play with Play-Doh to like act it out and all of the different things. Like we found that we needed the narratives. We needed those stories just as much as he did, right? So don't be afraid to tell stories that make it meaningful and give you a sense of empowerment and some shared language together, right? A way to connect over what's going on. And don't be afraid to talk to your kid. The number of kids that I've met, because no one at the hospital knows how to talk to the parents and the parents don't know how to talk to the kid has no idea why they're there. Right. They're with a cancer diagnosis, a devastating cancer diagnosis, and they don't know what's happening to themselves. Yeah. That's deep. That's really, really deep. Yeah. So I think you were right on thinking about this side of things that we often don't talk about. You know, we want to talk about the things we can control. And these are some of the things that feel like they're out of our reach, but they're really there in front of us if we rely on our ability to be present and to relate and connect.
there was a book that I read after Lander was diagnosed called Alter Ego, and one thing that really stuck with me was Bo Jackson, the football player, the professional athlete extraordinaire, made the statement that he never played a down of football in his life. And so that stuck. He said he had convinced, I think it was Jason, when he was on a football field, he was Jason. He was this nightmarish figure that went to work. And so after going through that and thinking back, I think another one of those just things you just can't explain is a few months before Lander was diagnosed, maybe 6 weeks, a friend had a fantasy like costume group where they did like Elsa and they would show up to the parties. Well, Spider-Man was one of their figures, and Spider-Man came out and did a little exercise thing with Lander about drinking this super potion that Doctor Strange had invented, and then they arm wrestled. And so Lander at 5 beat Spider-Man in an arm wrestling exercise, right?
So great.
And so he was just so excited with himself that, Dad, can you believe a 5-year-old beat Spider-Man? I'm so strong. And so that was something that, especially after understanding the alter ego effect, we played on. Like, dude, you are so strong. You beat Spider-Man in arm wrestling. You are so strong. Everything we're doing is just to continue to make you stronger and stronger. And so even to the point that I had a comic book made of the experience in there. And yeah, I'll have to send you that. I never got it printed or anything like that, but the digital, I got it for Lander. But it goes back to the mindset. Lander legitimately, as bad as it sucked at times, right? As bad as the nausea from chemo, or, he had a bowel obstruction from scar tissue in the surgery. That was maybe the worst part of the whole thing. But he never thought he was sick. And that mindset, again, is so important. But for me, Audra, something else as the caregiver, I think we can neglect ourselves very easily, right? And so I made my nutrition, my sleep, my exercise for my mind, not for me personally, not being selfish. It's like I've got to be the best I can be to be there for my child, to be there for my family as we navigate this. Because I've got 4 kids now, So as when you have something so significant, it's easy to put all your attention on the problem, right? And let the other family members fall to the wayside. And I'm been guilty of that. I didn't navigate it perfectly by any stretch. So what's some tools? What's some books? What's some resources that we can do to do this? I love how you said that resiliency training, that mental resiliency. What are some of those tools you would recommend that we use for those exercises?
Okay, that's a great point. And I'm so glad that you did that. I didn't do that. We all have different coping skills, and I have a part that wants to do things. And so that part showed up in my coping instead of emotionally processing. It was before I understood any of that, to start an organization and to just work my ass off and to not sleep and to drive myself into the ground. And I ended up in the hospital a few years into it, and, just not taking care of myself, trying to care for my child, my family, and everybody else, right? Like trying to do this stuff for the child cancer community. I didn't learn boundaries. I didn't learn, a good amount of things about myself until I hit that crisis point. And so one of the big things that I do now is in our work with Maxwell Project is urging families to do what you've done and to see how it's imperative that they show up for themselves so that they can then show up for their kid and their families. Like, it is not, I know, especially for so many moms I know, they're like, they are the last on their list. But what will happen is the whole family will suffer at that point. So in our app in Maxwell Project Connect, we have something called the Be Super Plan. It's a Be Super Action Plan. It's a 7-point foundational action plan. It actually starts with mindset. And we have e-learning courses. They're self-traveled. You can go through them yourself. You can learn all of the different aspects of this. And it includes mindset. We also have fierce foods, obviously, but we have physical activity. We have a bunch of work on meditation and sleep. We even have a good amount of content on your home. What are some simple things that you can do in your home to make things more restorative and health promoting? And then community is a huge part of it. Community is therapeutic. It is a huge part of self-care. So I think sleep, probably for most of us parents, childhood cancer parents, probably number one opportunity to start to focus on our health. I think sleep is probably the first thing that goes, and probably one of the hardest things for parents to get back, and is one of the most health promoting things that we can do for ourselves. So that is one of the first things I think is really, really important. That probably comes in my mind after mindset of like low hanging fruit. So we have a good amount of data and information on that and how to support sleep hygiene. And of course, physical activity cannot be underestimated, even if walking is incredible for us, right? Absolutely. You may not be able to hit the gym or whatever, but so we have that plan. We also offer retreats, and we also offer emotional health support. We've got like one-on-one coaching, a good amount of things for emotional processing. I think that's one of the most important things that we can start to do as well. It's like learning how to identify what we're feeling and learning how to process the emotions and what's coming up for us. So we have a lot of resources for all of this in Maxwell Project Connect. We offer all sorts of things for free online. Like we have a breathwork workshop coming up this weekend, for example, that is free. It's amazing what we can do with our breath. Just learning some basic breathwork techniques can do so much for us. And we try to offer things too that you can do in the hospital. So we serve families who are in treatment, survivorship, and bereaved as well. So the full spectrum. And we try to provide resources for each stage of the journey. So hopefully also resources that are easy enough to deploy in the hospital as well. So I would just second your thoughts on this, that it's imperative. Like it's one of the most important things, and don't feel guilty about focusing on yourself, because you have to start seeing it as a necessity for your family.
Yeah. I think that another way of encapsulating what you just said is it's stress management, right? Like there's the sleep is a coping mechanism for stress, the meditation, the breathing. I actually luckily had been into kind of the biohacking realm when all of this occurred, and so like I had some of the tech, like the Muse headset, to where I could meditate to save my life, right? But being able to utilize some of these tools that could help walk you through it and give you the biofeedback like in real time, that was a game changer for me. I can't shut off my monkey mind if I'm not having something like that. And so I love that you brought up the breath work and the meditation and the sleep, because it's so crucial. But so let's shift maybe a little bit more into the practical things that we can do. Audra, one thing for me that has just been absolutely life-changing, and as you know, I own a grocery store with a health store component to it, is supplements. And so like magnesium, I have seen magnesium, this crazy little mineral, right, change people's lives. So
100%,
what are some of the practical things that, little things, little shifts that you have seen be game changers in lives?
I think it's such a great point. And I love what you do, by the way. I think it's you're a powerful point of intervention in our community, just such an amazing resource. I'm just really grateful for what you bring and what you offer. Supplementation is key, and it's a huge opportunity for us, right? Because there are things that are really just tough to get into a child's diet in enough quantities. Same thing with us, right? As a family, we have some basics that we recommend that are pretty universal. Magnesium being one of them, vitamin D being one of them. That research has shown the vast majority of kids with brain tumors present with critically low vitamin D levels. Wow. It is crazy upon diagnosis. So it's really interesting. And one thing that we do, and that I found, is that essentially we do precision nutrigenomics in Maxwell Project, and we're trying to raise the money to fully fund this for any family that wants it. So we end up funding families on the waiting list as we get funding for it. But our dietitian is able to help families identify what supplements will work with a child's physiology and what won't, or what are counterindicated for the drugs they're on and things like that. So one of the things that I've learned is I'd love to make a blanket statement about what supplements would work for most everybody, but it is kind of hard to do. But we really believe in omega-3s. Omega-3 supplementation is really important. Magnesium, vitamin D, for the most part, curcumin. I have not seen many cases of kids who can't tolerate it or utilize it, or might have a genetic SNP that makes that difficult. I think one of the most important things is actually protein, like quality, well-sourced protein. When it comes to the building blocks of our cells, when it comes to our mitochondrial health, things like that, it is so important that our kids get enough protein. And I think that's something that can really slide super easily. You have a kid, we've had a kid in treatment, and it can be the last thing they want.
Yeah.
You know, what they really want is usually like crackers and, chips and things like that. So it can be really, really difficult. And also adequate fiber. Fiber is huge. Fiber is should be its own. I know it's considered a carbohydrate. It should be its own super macronutrient. Fiber is one of the most powerful tools that we can use in our bodies for our gut health and beyond. We know that now. We used to think that 50% of our serotonin was produced in our gut. Now, when I was at the Metabolic Health Summit, the latest, Chris Palmer presented on it, and he said something like 85%.
Wow.
So all of our kids suffer from gut dysbiosis. If they've been in treatment, it will be the case. Every single one of them has to take prophylactic antibiotics. Every single one of them will be devastated by the process, right? So gut health is one of the most important things that we can focus on, and fiber is like our biggest ally for gut health. Probiotic supplementation, I think, is super important. And again, the disclaimer is it depends on what you're using for treatment and where you're at with the treatment and, various things like that. There are some doctors who will poo-poo it. No pun intended, but others who are really embracing of it, So I think that some of the challenges come too with you want to introduce supplementation and your medical team is like, we don't really feel great about you supplementing with omega-3s because, let's say a kid with leukemia might interact with leukemia treatment, or it might cause blood clotting problems if you're, getting port access or whatever it might be. Then discuss how we can do it. Maybe we can supplement when we're not on treatment, maybe when we're on an off week, or if, whatever it might be. And when folks say no, we always ask for the data. Like, what is it that informs the no? Can we see the papers on that? Kindly, nicely, can we see the evidence for that? When my son started the ketogenic diet, for example, and this was back in 2013, so it was really, there were no magazines on the shelves like
right.
keto, or, there was no products. There was 0 products in the store. People thought we were killing him. It was a really difficult time. And our oncologist said, well, we're just really concerned about kidney stones because of a higher risk of kidney stones. And I'm like, well, the chemo that he was on causes kidney failure. So it's about the risks that they accept versus the risks they don't really know about. Right. And you can take one Brazil nut and get enough selenium to counteract the kidney. It's an easy fix, right? Yeah. So part of it is just continuing to be curious and asking your team if they would continue to be curious with you, because there's a lot of powerful information out there, low-hanging fruit, like you said. But I think magnesium, vitamin D, for example, omega's probiotic. I think curcumin, just on the inflammation factor, maybe a black cumin seed oil, are basics that are really sustaining. Also berberine, really amazing for the gut, really great to counteract, infections and things like that. And then also blood sugar lowering. I don't know if they would, doctors would consent depending on the age of the kid, but these are some things that we've used in our, in Max Lab and also with Max.
No, I love the different awareness based off of what the medical narrative is, right? And so like I've changed my mind on a few things over the course of the years. I feel like if we always believe the same thing, we're not actually learning, because we don't know what that mechanism is, right? So like if I haven't grown in another 5 years, then I hadn't learned anything. I've just bought into my own dogma. And so I love how you went keto early, because 13 is super early for that metabolic aspect. I don't know how much Seafried had even put out at that point. And Otto Warburg was still a nutcase, So
That's right. Yeah.
What I find really interesting, though, is that your husband was at UCLA in 2011. And so one of my favorite people in the entire world was there also around that time. It may have been a little before, a little after, but Dr. Laszlo Boros, I think he is absolutely brilliant, and he was working there. I'm almost positive at that time. And so that leads me to something that I never would have come across had I not continued to question in Deuterium. So I have gone through interviewing multiple carnivore specialists, multiple metabolic practitioners, alternative practitioners, even to plant-based. I've covered it all, and I sincerely have no agenda. I just want to know what works, right? What is applicable to our situation first, right? And then share that, not with telling somebody else what they need to do or have to do, but this is what we have done and why, more importantly. So the two things that I would like to have your take, and if you just don't know, that's fine too, but like Deuterium is incredible as a understanding for cancer. I think it should be at least on somebody's radar to at least look at what Dr. Boros has put out there. And then the melatonin. So as you discussed supplements and then the vitamin D, that brings me to the point that I think that we are failing miserably in our understanding of the sun, our understanding of the minerals, and the understanding of melatonin as a compound that is crucial in the fight of cancer. So for one, I just want to say, like, I think supplementing with melatonin for somebody with cancer is an absolute necessity to at least be aware of. So what is your experience with Deuterium and say even melatonin?
I will say Deuterium, only some reading. I still don't know enough, but I have read some literature. I've heard some talk on podcasts and things like that. I would love to know more. Melatonin, 100% agree. Like, without a doubt, we supplement with melatonin. Melatonin is pretty amazing too. I think it's really important too, thinking about the relationship with something like tryptophan, like 5-HTP, precursor to serotonin, is a really, really important part of the melatonin production process as well. So if your gut health isn't in order, you're not producing, melatonin as well. I think supplementation is really important. I actually ended up with long COVID after getting COVID 2 years ago, and melatonin has been a huge part of the recovery for that. And so I think the sun is really important. We don't sunscreen unless you're out all day and have to. We find it really important to get out in the morning. It's just probably exactly the stuff that you've taken from your biohacking, background, right? Get out in the morning, get the sun in your eyes. We don't use sunglasses. Get all of that in, right? Like the circadian rhythm, lights go out in our house. Our house is pretty dark at night. Our neighbors at one point were like, why is your house so dark when you're home? And so it's really important to us. One thing I'm really interested in learning more about actually is low-dose naltrexone use, especially in the case of being able to regulate microglia in the brain and potential use in brain cancer. And I'm hoping there will be more on that. One of our families in Max Love worked directly with Dr. Seyfried on using mebendazole in her child's DIPG diagnosis. Really promising. It wasn't adequate for her at that time, but there's so many different kind of things on the horizon that Dr. Nasha will tell you in her Terrain and her Train 10, which I think applies a little bit differently to children, but still we're talking about the potential for a whole host of lifestyle factors and compounds and supplementation and foods and the environment around us, a whole host of things that go into supporting a child's health span in this process. And my hope has always been, if we can look at all of this stuff, including things like the ketogenic diet, what if we can lower toxicity? What if we can lower the amount of treatment a child needs, right? What if there could be, for example, for my son, when he did radiation, he did 2 types of radiation. The first time he was in ketosis, didn't need steroids at all to lower the brain inflammation because the ketogenic diet did it. His oncologist went along with it. Kid never needed steroids. And he did 6 weeks of radiation to the brainstem. So think about the effect of quality of life and on his health. We didn't have blood sugar issues with him. It's definitely health promoting. And then he never had any roid rage or any issues. And so his relationships remained good. Like, can we start to think holistically about the human being, you know? Absolutely. And I think some of these things that you're mentioning, it sounds like your interest is similar to mine. Like, what are some of these things that we can do, these levers that we can push and pull to help us lower toxicity, increase quality of life, and then also like increase the chances of, if we can't, we can't invite the disease to leave the body, or to correct itself, if you will, then can we live with it? In the case of my son, who's now 17, can we have that relationship where it just doesn't grow anymore?
Absolutely. No, I love that. And I think that this is where you're spot on with the community aspect. It's having a community that is focused on the positivity. Cause I'll be honest, I got into, it's like, wow, my son has Wilms. So I'm going to join the Wilms Facebook groups. I'm going to dive in and learn about all this. And what I found, and I'm not, trying to poo-poo on that, but I found it was a place of despair. It was a place that it was just soul draining, and I had to get out. Like I don't, occasionally I'll still see a post or something there, but it's having the right community is extremely important. It's not just the community, right?
That's it. Yeah. My he has 2 PhDs. The first was at UCLA in geography, human geography. The second was UC Irvine in public health, which relates directly to our work here. But it was really interesting. He wrote a second dissertation on online communities and meaning making in the childhood cancer space using social media. And the key is social media can be devastating to your mental health. Yeah. Or it can be empowering, but it depends on the quality of the community you're in, exactly what you're saying. And I found it to be true too. I cannot be in the vast majority of the Facebook groups. Super well-meaning people, lovely people running the groups often and all that, but I can't be there seems to be this anchor dragging things down. It's almost like the most, like you said, despair, the most difficult. There is this just like pull downward, unless it is framed, unless there is a safe container created. Yeah. So Maxwell Project, we developed a Facebook group in 2012. It was amazing. We had like 10 rules, and we're focused on just positive social support, right? Like, what can we do to support each other, show up for each other? Beautiful. Mutually empowering and caring and all that. And then we went off of Facebook into our own private network, where it's been honestly harder to engage people because they want to be where they are on Facebook. But I find that when they come into our group in our private app, they're not like triggered from seeing your aunt's political post or something. And then like you're coming in, and you don't know where you are, what you're talking about. So at least there's more intentionality, and we can hold that container even better and more safely in our own space. But I think you're right. It's the quality that matters. And you want to surround yourself by people who are similarly, growing and looking to lift each other up and support each other. It doesn't mean we don't get real. We get very real, but there's something, this comportment towards like growth, I think is really what it is. Like, we don't stop growing because we end up in this situation. For many of us, we start growing more, you know?
Absolutely. No, I think, and you know, that what comes to mind there is like, show me your friends, I'll show you your future. Or, you know, as the Bible says, as iron sharpeth iron. I think that community is so important, especially when you have this positive. I mean, that's why I named our platform Sowing Prosperity. Like, I want to focus on the positive. So Audra, thank you so much for taking the time to visit, the work you put in. You know, I just have the utmost respect for anybody that can take an absolutely, you know, devastating life event and turn it into just service and helping other people. So I just applaud you and thank you so much.
Thank you, Logan. I feel the same way. And thank you for all that you do, taking your journey and turning it into something that's helping so many others. We're kindred spirits. You know, we're approaching this in the same way. And it's been such a pleasure to meet you.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Audra.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Sowing Prosperity. Be sure to follow along across the social media platforms, including YouTube, and be sure to go to sowingprosperity.com.